Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the last look back at Talking Heads for 2016. The enforcement of disability discrimination laws, fines for poppy wearing, and the island's voice in Brexit preparations were some of the topics discussed this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Is it going to be straightforward enough to enforce disability discrimination laws in the Isle of Man? The long-awaited legislation came into force in the island last week. It's now illegal to discriminate against an individual based on their disability. And in another 3 years, all shops and public places will have to have implemented reasonable measures to ensure that access is easy for all. It's something that's been in the pipeline for over a decade now. Is this legislation long overdue, or do you think it might end up being a little bit heavy-handed? Is it going to be possible to enforce it? Tell us your thoughts on this. I think that this is a fine piece of legislation to have, as long as it's not one of those one-size-fits-all type pieces of legislation. It strikes me that quite often these things are a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. So as long as it's looked at sensibly by people, I would think that there's no problem at all with it. And I think that most people are quite happy to have legislation like this brought in if it tries to make the life easier of people who suffer from some sort of a disability. Stu, surely some mental abilities are essential. For example, for the job of air traffic controller or pilot, says David H. Yes, I suppose. I'm not quite sure how that would work. And the other thing is that, we talk about discrimination as being a bad thing, whereas actually, in many fields, having a discriminating taste, for example, is considered to be a very good thing. So is discrimination always bad? I suppose if you're talking about people who've got some sort of a disability and being discriminated against, then yes. But I think, again, we've got to be careful not to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut here. But what do you think about it? Do you think this is long overdue? Do you think it's going to be a fairly straightforward, common sense approach? Or do you think that it could all be a little bit more difficult with people bringing spurious cases or whatever, or using this sort of legislation to try and get compensation out of somebody? Stuart, as regards Disability Discrimination Acts, Australia did it in 1992, New Zealand in 93, UK in 95 and Hong Kong in 1995 too. You've only got to look at the building that you're working in to see how far behind the Isle of Man is, says Muriel. Yeah, well, I suppose so. I just worry that this is sometimes a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I mean, just thinking about my shop, do I have to have braille menus printed, for example, so that I'm not discriminated against people with limited eyesight? Because I've never been asked for one, and the trouble is that you quite often, as a business owner, you've got to do all sorts of things to make yourself disabled friendly or whatever that are never going to be used. So it's a huge cost that you've got to pass on and make yourself less competitive and all the rest of it. That's the worry about things like that. But yeah, okay. And certainly this building that I'm in at the moment is completely inaccessible to anybody in a wheelchair, for example, unless you've got 3 or 4 fellas to carry the wheelchair and the person in it as well. Why has it taken so long? If it was past 10 years ago, do the listeners think it would have gone through quicker if we had some disabled MHKs? Does this, I think we have had, haven't we? Does this now mean taxi drivers who won't take assistance dogs can no longer be prosecuted here as they are in the UK this past year? I don't quite understand that, but so have people been prosecuted for not taking guide dogs in the taxis? Surely that's down to the taxi driver, isn't it? Not every taxi is equipped to take guide dogs, but I'm sure that if you ask them, they'll get somebody out in one of these people carrier type things. But I don't know, is the answer to that. I've not seen that story. Let's go to the lines. We've got Julia on. Hello, Julia.
No, I was listening to it, and I think discrimination does start quite early in life. Okay. Because I was waiting at Glen Crutchery bus stop in the winter there, and a group of boys came down, and behind them there was one lagging who was obviously a handicapped boy. Now, when he joined the queue waiting for the bus, there was conversation going on, and a bit of sniggering and, loud giggling and different sort of remarks that were anything but sort of friendly. So with that, I thought, what's going on here? And this poor boy, I thought, here he is, a handicapped boy, and the others who obviously knew him And we're used to this. He probably travels the bus twice a day. He had to put up with that. And then behind them came another young man who looked a little bit older, and I thought, well, this must be a prefect keeping an eye out. At least I hope so. Anyway, he did join the queue, and when the baiting of this other young handicapped boy had stopped temporarily, but on a lowered sort of tone, but not exactly entirely. And he said, the prefect boy said something to the other group, and they quietened down. And with that, the other boy, who was handicapped, he just put his bag on his shoulder and walked and stood about 20 yards away, also waiting for the same bus. But he had to go out to get away from all this.
Well, it's bullying, really, isn't it?
It was, and I thought, well, this boy's parents are pleased to know that he's getting more education to prepare him for the time when he has to look out for himself. And the reaction he's getting from his mates is anything but helpful. He will not want to go to work.
Where do people learn then about discrimination? Should it be in the home? Should it be at school?
Yes. Surely in their own home. I mean, when I was a child living in Ramsey, there were two sisters, both handicapped, but the elder one looked after the younger one. And one day I was in the Parliament Street with my aunt, and the younger one ran and tripped. The other one, who was looking after her, her arms were full of shopping. My aunt never thought twice. She crossed the road and helped to pick the other girl up. And I thought, isn't she brave? I would be scared to go and go over there and help. But I just stood where I was left. But my aunt never thought anything about it. Somebody would needed help, and she got it.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, you make some good points there, Julia. Thank you very much for getting in touch. And somebody raised the point about guide dogs that are not being carried always by taxi drivers. And I wasn't sure what the law is, but a couple of further comments on this, one of which clarifies, hopefully. First one is from Beth, who says, person with an assistance dog, the only exception is if you have a medical certificate to prove that you're allergic to dogs. This is the taxi driver. If this happens to you, you can report the driver to the taxi licensing people and they can be prosecuted and fined, and in extreme cases lose the licence in the UK, and that's what we need here. It's against the law for a taxi driver not to take, and then it runs out because Beth phoned me. She said, I used that Siri thing on the phone and it went wrong on me. So I think Beth was finishing that by saying that it's against the law for a taxi driver not to take somebody with a disability because of the dog. And then this hopefully gives us the official view on this, certainly as far as the UK is concerned. I don't know if it's the same in the Isle of Man. Stu, a vehicle doesn't need any special adaptation to take a guide dog. If the passenger seat's pushed back as far as it'll go, then the dog sits in the footwell with the blind passenger sitting on the seat. Just don't trap the dog's tail in the door now. Generally, this is Muslim drivers, as their religion limits contact with dogs before attending prayers. That's obviously where the problem is. However, under UK law, disability trumps religion. The driver can only refuse to carry a dog if they've got a medical condition preventing them. Regards from a Grey Birmingham, that's from John, and John is a training health and safety manager, so I presume that he's got the official word on that. Other comments about disability, Robin Peel's been on. It's a good idea this discrimination legislation's finally come in. Things need to be done to help people who are not particularly mobile. But I have one complaint about the children today. They tend to sit at the front of the bus in the disabled seats, seemingly ignorant of what they're actually for. They push and shove and jump the queue at the bus stop if somebody's moving too slowly. That's no good for somebody who isn't particularly mobile or has, for example, arthritis. Sometimes they end up having to sit near the back of the bus or even have to stand up sometimes if the children won't get up out of the seats. It's not all children, but it does seem to be a good-sized minority who are ignorant of people with disabilities. Well, I don't know who... See, this is the trouble, that you don't have conductors on buses anymore that would monitor that. And if the seats are for people who've got a disability and children are sitting in them, they'd soon shift them, wouldn't they? I don't suppose it's quite so easy for the driver to do that. What's that? Morons, Peters, Dave. I'm not quite sure what we're talking about there, but okay. Another one. I was in a coffee shop queue once when a lady refused to be served by a very capable young man because he had Down syndrome. Okay. And this is linked, I suppose. Seems a doctor won't make a house call these days unless one is housebound. So what's the definition of housebound? How about don't drive, 4 children, 3 of whom are under 3 and 2 not well? Apparently not. Talk about discrimination. Very cross. Tell me again who pays the doctor. Oh yes, that's me and you, says Sue. Calm down, Sue. You'll need a doctor. Left-handers, what happens when schools refuse to supply scissors and can openers, etc., that allow left-handers to fully participate in lessons? I've asked twice and nothing's changed. Is this discrimination? Well, I don't know. Can you not just beat them for using the wrong hand with a big long stick? Isn't that what they used to do? Didn't that work? Not acceptable these days. Oh, right, okay, fine.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Could the legalisation and regulation of drugs, recreational drugs particularly, make them safer? A father who lost both his sons to an ecstasy overdose 2 years ago this month supports the idea. Jack and Torrin Lakeman from Port St Mary died after taking a lethal quantity of ecstasy, which they'd bought on what's called the dark web. The tragedy has led the father Ray to reach the conclusion the boys might still be alive today if the drug hadn't been illegal. Health and social care bosses say that they are considering the options when it comes to educating users on safe, illegal drug use. DHSC Chief Executive Malcolm Couch insists that work is underway by advisors across government to develop a new national drugs and alcohol strategy. Could legalisation and regulation of drugs make them safer? Or would there still be a black market for unregulated substances? Would there still be a black market for recreational drugs, even if you were able to buy them over the counter with or without a prescription? Tell us your thoughts about this. What's the safest way to deal with this? What's the best way to deal with this? It seems that the war on drugs has long since been lost. It doesn't work. Just saying no doesn't work. People have continued to take drugs in increasing numbers in some areas. What do you think the answer is to it? Our first text comes in. I don't understand why intelligent people would want to take drugs or run the risk of taking drugs. I can, and I'm not a drug user, apart from I used to smoke cigarettes, so I can't be judgmental about other people who are addicted to things. But whether you're addicted or not, I can understand why people might want to take drugs, because the fact of the matter is that, you know, if you're doing a job that you hate all week, or you know, you can't get work, or you not everybody lives an idyllic lifestyle. So if you just about manage to get through the week, and then on a Friday or Saturday or whatever, you've got a spare tenner and you want to have a bit of fun, I can understand why some people might choose to use drugs that just take them away from the horrible situation that they're in life. Now, it's all very well being holier than thou and saying, oh, well, you'd be better off spending that tenner on improving your lifestyle or whatever, but you know, sometimes an easy fix like drugs is what people need to get through the week. So I can understand why people do it, certainly. What else have we got? The dark web, the clue is in the name. I have every sympathy with all involved here. However, the best message, hey kids, don't take drugs, says Chris W. If only it was that simple, Chris. You know, it's a bit like saying to young people, don't have sex. And don't smoke, and don't drink, and don't eat fatty foods, and cut down on your sugar and your salt and all the rest of it. You know, you can say things like that until you're blue in the face, but to say just say no to people, it really doesn't work. What else have we got? Drugs are illegal for a reason. If somebody's stupid enough to think that they know better, that's their problem. It's not nice for the parents, but if you play with fire, you get burnt, says Gary. Well, that's a bit of a hardline point of view on it, Gary. I feel desperately sorry for the chap that we've just been listening to, lost 2 sons. You know, and it's not his fault that they chose to play with fire. I have a good job I enjoy, and I enjoy life in general, and every month or a couple of months I might go out and take a pill or just a half, and it doesn't in any way affect any other aspects of my life. Thank you for that. Thanks for getting in touch. I mean, that's a comment that I've heard before, that probably there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the Isle of Man who do use recreational illicit drugs. And it doesn't cause them any problems. We only ever hear about problem cases, people who hurt themselves or worse still kill themselves by taking illicit drugs, or people who end up in trouble because of it, going through the court system. But I suspect that there are certainly hundreds of people who regularly use illegal drugs, and it doesn't affect them in a particularly bad way. It's just like, you or I might enjoy a couple of beers every now and then. There's certain people who enjoy cocaine or marijuana or whatever it is, and don't have a problem with it. Maria called, no, drugs should not be legalised, they should be banned altogether. Good luck with that. Drugs only mask problems, they don't solve problems. Having a rubbish job and so on won't be solved by taking drugs. People can't seem to go out and have a good time without drugs. Something wrong there, says Dave. Well, I don't know, Dave. I mean, you're probably like me. You can make the best out of a bad situation, but not everybody is able to do that. And I don't know. I think, the old thing about, don't criticise somebody unless you've walked in their shoes for a while is particularly valid here. And I've known people who are in that situation where, their lives are just a living misery. For one reason or another, and if for the cost of a tenner or something they want to take a pill on a Friday or a Saturday night, as long as it's not doing anybody else any harm, I don't particularly have a problem with it. The problem comes when either they're criminalised because of it, or they end up taking something that nobody knows what's actually in it. So you trust the person that you buy it from, and that trust is misplaced, and and people hurt themselves or kill themselves by taking stuff that we've got no quality assurance with, and that's kind of one of these suggestions, that at least people would know what they were going to take. If it was practical to administer ecstasy through a medical practitioner, how long before the government taxes it beyond reach, handing control back to the criminal, says Neil. Well, has that happened with booze, though? Because people would say, once they tax it too much, then people will bring it in through the back door. I'm not saying that there isn't any illegal booze, but there's not that much, really, is there? Occasional still, maybe up in the hills, I don't know. But I wouldn't have thought that was a big problem. And I think that most people would probably prefer to buy something over the counter that they knew the quality was all right of it. That it was safe to use. I think people would probably quite happily pay for that. So several US states recently legalised marijuana. Anyone can go down to the shop now and buy some. As far as I know, there hasn't been a rise in crime or deaths or any negative effects, really. No, if anything, I expect they probably sell more kebabs late at night and pizzas and things. It's also made the government millions in tax. I can't see the problem as long as it doesn't extend to the more serious drugs. That's allegedly from Cheech and or Chong. Yeah, good, thank you. Stu, why not ban the most dangerous drugs that causes the most harm to society, i.e. alcohol, cigarettes? They're not banned because of the large tax take. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. More than anything else in life, never has the phrase buyer beware been more apt. After explaining to our family kids about drugs, I leave it up to their own intelligence to decide. I won't dictate, it's their decision. Anyway, I say again, buyer beware. Yeah, the only thing is that one tablet, Albert, looks the same as another, doesn't it? It's not like a car where you can go over it and decide whether or not it's safe because all the components work and the brakes are sound on it. With drugs, you don't know until you take it. Although, listening to that interview, there are places now that will test drugs to make sure that they're reasonably safe. What's the rate of tax in various guises on tobacco and alcohol? Vast. Huge amount. What revenue could be raised on drugs? Probably an equally huge amount, I would have thought. Legalise and tax prohibitively to control quality and reduce use, and also other taxes. Okay, what gets me about the purchase of illegal substances is the fact that the buyer really does care about the welfare of their lives. Do they not realise that the dealer is out to make his lifestyle more comfortable without getting off his own posterior and putting in a bit of hard work? The dealer couldn't give a monkeys about the buyer's ultimate welfare. I'm sorry, if you want to dabble in drugs, you do so at your own risk, says Chris M. Okay. Enjoy listening to Manx Radio as always. Have a very Merry Christmas and a great beginning to the new year. God bless. That's from Bob, who I think is in the States. I think he's one of our American listeners. I think sometimes people mistake drug taking as a cause rather than a symptom, says somebody else. In many cases, people often take drugs as a result of what's going on in their lives. Yeah, it's a form of coping. Yeah, absolutely. What we need is better support, better mental health services to work as a community to improve each other's quality of life. The hectic nature of modern life is terrifying to many, and often people see drugs as a way out. Let's look at why people take drugs rather than focus on criminalising them. This from Mark. Stu, just for the record, to rebut those who don't think that drugs have side effects. Ask any pharmacist and they'll tell you that there does not exist a drug without side effects, really. Legalising dangerous substances because the current supply is even worse than the pure form is the most illogical argument to make. a drug legal. These drugs were banned for good reason after advice from well-informed scientists. I would sooner listen to them about the safety of a drug than a drug pusher or user, says Mark. Okay, I'm not convinced by your argument, Mark, but, we often agree to disagree on things. Stuart, this is from Albert. So, as I say again, buyer beware, which basically translates into don't take drugs. Difficult, isn't it? Albert again. Well, caveat emptor indeed, Albert. Do something for others instead of thinking of yourself. You'll be amazed at the difference. You will be so busy you won't have time to take drugs. Happy Christmas from somebody else. Well, yeah, like I say, I think you need to walk in somebody else's shoes sometimes. And there are people who just take drugs, like people who just have a drink, because it's a fun thing to do, not necessarily because they've got a rotten life. Or that they're trying to escape from anything. It's a fun thing to do, and they've never had a problem with it, and so like that. Illegal drug taking is not a form of coping; it's a form of compounding the problem, says Mark. No instance of taking illegal drugs has ever solved anyone's problems. Well, Bill Hicks, one of my favourite comedians ever, had a very interesting take on drugs, and have a look at it on YouTube, Mark, and see what you think about it. Your pro-drug propaganda, what? Is sending the wrong message to any young and confused people who will doubtless be listening. Regards from Mark. Am I doing a pro-drugs propaganda? I'm just trying to be logical and reasonable about it rather than the knee-jerk reaction. It's illegal, be safe, don't take drugs at all. There must be more important topics for discussion. That's a matter of opinion, I suppose, and maybe you can tell us what more important topics you'd like to discuss. Mark says, yes, you are very pro-drug, Stu. Am I really? Do you think so? And I've seen Bill Hicks' routine many times. It's a very dated thing now from an unfortunate, bitter man. His arguments don't stack up 20 years after he made them, says Mark. I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm not pro-drugs at all. Well, I don't think I'm pro-drugs. I think I'm pro-choice. I think I'm pro doing something different on the basis that the war on drugs doesn't work. Just saying no doesn't work. Then I'm always interested to hear from people like Professor Nutt, who's got a very different take on drugs, and that's why he was fired from being the UK's drug czar, because he's got a very different take to that of the establishment. And I just think that sometimes you need to sort of look outside the box a little bit, think outside the box a little bit. And I think that that's the way it is with drugs. But I can understand why people try that. I've never tried anything heavy, but I've watched programmes about psychedelics and LSD, and that's kind of what Bill Hicks was talking about. His entire consciousness was expanded, he said, by using LSD, and it didn't do him any harm or make him into a horrible person or do him any physical damage, as far as he knows, or mental damage. But it expanded his consciousness and made him think about things in a different way. And if I was braver, then maybe I'd like to try that, because it would be an interesting experiment. Now, the trouble is that it can send people absolutely loopy as well, thinking about Syd Barrett now from Pink Floyd. But, if you could do that safely, then I'd be all for having my consciousness expanded a little bit. Prohibition in the USA made a fortune of the gangsters. Legalisation of drugs would eliminate the criminal elements. They wouldn't make money and control the quality. Mr. Lakeman is correct. If it was controlled, then his sons would be alive today. Okay. That was from Chris. Support, not punishment, as far as drugs are concerned. Good. Stu, don't be a nut. Professor Nutt. It may upset certain circles, and we know what happened to him. Just saying, says Brian. Right then.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should football teams be fined for wearing poppies, or should they be fined for wearing poppies? The FA of all the UK home nations have been fined by FIFA for displaying poppies during games last month. Barry Weir reports.
The Football Association and Scottish FA have been fined £35,000 and £15,000 respectively after players wore poppies on armbands during their match at Wembley on Armistice Day. The fine for England is larger because of several cases of spectator misconduct, according to governing body FIFA, which bans political and religious symbols. Wales have been fined £15,000 and Northern Ireland nearly £12,000 for displays inside grounds.
That was Barry Weir reporting most excitedly. Should an exception have been made for poppies to be worn, or do rules like this have to be upheld in all circumstances? Tell us what you think. I thought that that this was a legality in that you weren't allowed to have political symbols, but just looking through one of the news reports on this, according to the rulemaking International Football Association Board, IFAB, players cannot wear political, religious or personal slogans, statements or images. So that maybe sort of broadens the remit of them a little bit. So it's not just that it was a political slogan. There are all sorts of things generally which you would look at that rule and think, well, basically I can't have anything outside of football itself as part of the kit or as part of my personal kit. So what do you think about this? Do you think FIFA ought to be told to do one? Or do you think that the FAs of each of the member nations have been caught out and they're just going to have to pay the fine? Hey boy, the world's gone mad. Isn't that racist? Well, I don't think so. I'd tell them where to go. I thought the poppy appeal, etc., started in Britain, says G. Yes, I think it did start in Britain, but it's not a political thing, is it? It's an act of remembrance, but it seems that any sort of thing like that is not allowed as part of the outfit. So I suppose they were flouting known rules. I don't know. Stu, not really into football. Well, no, I care FA about football, I must admit. But I know that FIFA are not well liked. I think that they should all point blank refuse to pay the fine. What else can happen? They might kick everybody out. Well, bigger problems in the world than FIFA playing games. Just wear bigger poppies next year. That's a thought. I suppose that it would mean that the British Isles would be excluded completely from any form of international football. So that might slow things down a little bit and be counterproductive. Might be better to just sort of take it on the chin and say, yeah, okay, we'll pay the fine. And next year, our players will be wearing poppies and we'll pay the fine. Maybe that's the way to get the message over, I don't know. Let's go to the lines. We've got David on. Hello, David.
I'm president of Ogan AFC, but I'm also involved in junior football too. I think the UEFA one was appalling to actually fine England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales for doing that. Even on the day, Remembrance Day ourselves, or prior to that, actually all the clubs on the Isle of Man had 2 minutes respect.
Yeah.
Even that went down to the junior teams as well. It was so great.
Yeah, but if the rules are, I mean, well, I'm no fan of these sort of organisations like FIFA because it seems that they've got far too much power. But and on the face of it, the very suggestion that British players shouldn't wear poppies is absolutely ridiculous. But if the rules are that they don't wear any sort of a symbol, then they clearly broke the rules, didn't they?
But it is not. No, the issue there, it's a unified symbol. Really, is that. We respect the people who, like my own father, who is dead now, would really be going against them regarding the UEFA saying anything to football clubs from different countries. I just find that they call them the grey-haired individuals in these offices that sit up there to make these rules or challenge them. But how much satisfaction do they get by fining England, 15 or 30, I can't remember what you said now, 13 or 15,000 pounds? It's probably peanuts.
Yeah, 45,000 Swiss francs, which is 35 grand, is the fine against England, yeah.
And it just hurts the game, because what it does do, what English football or European football does do, all the revenue that's generated goes down to junior football right around the island, including the Isle of Man. And the spin-offs that we get from that, from having X amount of clubs and hundreds of kids playing every weekend. The only thing I must say is that our local vicar in Ogan is always one that says to me, he said to me, David, don't worry about it because kids always play on a Sunday. He says, I've always got a place for you in the graveyard.
Nice.
But I think it's appalling, really, because that all that money there could have been used for another purpose, could have gone down the stream, gone into junior football right around the island.
Expensive bottles of wine for directors' meetings and all sorts of things could have been used for.
They used to call them the dicky bows, didn't they? The black suits and the dicky bow ties.
All right, David, thank you very much indeed. What else have we got? More comments. We get in trouble for not having matching colour socks and tape to keep the socks up. Yes, here on the island. Well, rules is rules. aren't they? Tell FIFA to shove the fines where the sun doesn't shine, says Mark. Well, that would be quite an easy thing to do, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to do that. But if it meant that British Isles teams, let's say, couldn't play international football, it'd be counterproductive. Hi, Stu. To me, wearing a poppy has nothing to do with politics. No, I don't think it is to anybody. It's an act of remembrance. It's to remember all the people who died in conflict for us. FIFA must be really short of money, says Jill. Well, yeah, I expect that a lot of the members were on the losing side during the last conflict, and that might have something to do with it. But no, it's not supposed to be any sort of a victory march, is it, the poppy? It's an act of remembrance for everybody who died on both sides, as I understand it. So it is crazy, but maybe that's what is needed. Maybe the rules need to be changed to allow that. Of course, they would say that's the thin end of the wedge. You know, if they're going to allow that, then are they going to allow people to wear all sorts of other symbols? I don't know what the answer is to this. Derek Cordy says, I can't see any problem why they couldn't have worn poppies on the tracksuits before the game, then taken the tracksuits off to play and not had poppies on their actual strips. That seems like a pragmatic way of doing it, yeah. A bit of a compromise, isn't it? With regards to the fine, I'm a Man City supporter, says Derek, and some of our players get 4 times the amount of the fine for a week's wages. Yes, I suppose it'd be a good idea to remove the logos of firms like Tesco and Boots from their strips, firms who don't pay taxes. Well, that's the trouble with that once you start getting prescriptive about things like that. Stu, they wear black armbands for certain things. It's not a religious thing, says Ian. Are they allowed to do that? They can wear a black armband. I suppose that is just it's a sort of a default symbol without actually being a symbol. I don't vocabulary's gone completely. I know what I'm trying to say, I'm just not saying it very well. Yes, well, I wonder whether or not the poppy could be seen in the same way. Poppy is, as you say, a mark of remembrance and respect. It's not political, so why do they allow black armbands? There you go, which is also a mark of respect. That's from Eddie. FIFA need this money from fines for backhanders, says Pete. Couldn't possibly comment on that, Pete. I think that FIFA should have been asked first, which would have avoided the need for a climb down or a fine for going through with it. I think they were asked first and they said no, and they went ahead with it anyway. Poppy appeal has grown to such an extent that anything less than wearing a poppy at all times, non-stop, from mid-October onwards, is seen as showing a lack of respect. How respectful is it to wear a poppy on a smelly football kit? The UK, well, it's not smelly when they start the game, is it? The UK FA was aware of the rules about wearing poppies before the matches, so it should be no surprise that the fines were levied for infringements. Yeah, fair point. Yeah, that's certainly the way that technically I would look at that. They knew about it, they'd asked beforehand, they'd been told no, and they still did it, so can't really complain. Sorry for not sending this earlier, been topping up the water on the sprouts. This is from Phil. Yes, start them now, you want them to be good and soggy. If the home football associations pay these fines, they're stooping as low as FIFA. FIFA's under investigation by the Swiss authorities, and it's time the UK government investigated the home FAs, particularly England's. The current chairman has already stated that he's worried about having to pay compensation regarding the abuse of young players, saying it'll affect the grassroots, not the top teams. corrupt as anything. Bar humbug, says Phil. Okay, I don't know enough about football to comment. Derek called, in some cases the wages are 20 times as much at £250,000 a week. It's obscene, utterly disgusting. Yeah, it is. I don't suppose there's much that can be done about it. Those FIFA people are in their cushy overpaid jobs only because of the thousands who lost their lives fighting to give freedom to us all. The least we can do is wear a poppy to remember the fact, says JC. I think that's certainly the way that a lot of people look at it.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station. Manx Radio.
Is it likely the concerns of the Isle of Man and Channel Islands are going to be taken into consideration as the UK prepares to leave the EU? The island was represented at a House of Lords Select Committee on Brexit yesterday. So, will the Isle of Man be listened to? Or is it a case of whatever the UK wants, the UK will get, and will be an afterthought? I suspect that a lot of people listening will be saying, well, let's wait and see what happens. And that's all very well, but I think our politicians are trying to be as proactive about it as possible, look at all the possible implications and have some sort of a plan going in. What do you think about this? Do you think the UK is likely to do a good job for us? Or do you think they're going to look after their interests to the exclusion of all others. A couple of comments in. Stu, I feel that you have a vested interest in taking a pro-EU stance. Do you? What would the vested interest be in taking a pro-EU stance? And how interesting that you could be so wrong about that. But many others over here want a clear cut from the EU. We also need our voice put forward. Okie dokie. And Stu, we will have to take what the UK gives us. We're a very tiny player in all of this. According to Bill, I think you're probably right, Bill. I think we'll be very much looking for the scraps from the table on this. But the Isle of Man in the past, historically, has done quite well from those scraps, I would suggest. So maybe there are some opportunities as well as some threats. Isn't it strange? I was just talking about the scraps off the table, and at the same time, a text came through, which I didn't see, that used the same phraseology. I doubt that the UK will get the deal they want from themselves, let alone worrying what the Crown dependencies might want. I imagine it'll be make the most of the scraps from the big boys' table. That, according to Alan. If you've got a point of view on this one, then share it with us. One in from Chris just now, from Chris Ab. I don't think the withdrawal from the European Union will affect the island at all, because the respective UK governments giving the island and its political masters a back seat. We are in reality treated like second-class citizens. I've recently visited the Canary Islands and noted that in some of the guided tours that parts of their infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, etc., had been financed with money from the European Union by the Spanish government. There were similarities between the Canary Islands and the Isle of Man, for example. Spain has a king, an elected government, and I suppose that they may even class the Canary Islands as their own crown dependencies. If so, they've been generously looked after by the Spanish government. This then begs the question whether the UK governments could have been looking after the island by getting some finance from the European Union to facilitate the breakwater airport runway and other sections of infrastructure. The UK government seems good at taking the back contributions from us, but not looking after us in other respects, says Chris. The UK government hasn't told its own members what its position is yet, so I can't believe it'll tell Isle of Man politicians very much. No, it seems to be a fairly complicated thing. Maybe it was naive of any of us to think that it would be a fairly simple thing to say, right, Brussels, no, you're not on, we're out, thank you. You would have thought that might have been the end of it, but it's a hugely complicated process, this getting out of the UK thing, so it is going to take some time. I think that, as long as people negotiating goodwill. Stu, the person I would enlist to help the island through Brexit is Nigel Farage. Nigel's a great friend of the Isle of Man. Indeed, I had the pleasure to meet him when he was last on the island a couple of years back. In addition, he has a direct line to the most powerful man in the world, and whilst everybody in the UK, like Nicola Sturgeon, chose to look down the nose at Donald Trump, despite the tens of millions he has invested in places like Scotland, this is something the Isle of Man should be in a position to capitalise on. That from Paul. Yes, well, Castletown Golf Links, maybe he'll buy it, Donald Trump. He gets on well with the locals, I believe, as far as planning is concerned. So, yes, who knows? He could fit in well here, couldn't he? And a text in, Stu, what's with all the doom and gloom? Brexit is a godsend we could prosper from. No, I agree with you. I think, wherever there's a threat, there's often an opportunity. And, it's just whether or not the Isle of Man is likely to be well represented in this, in that we are a bit part player, really, in this whole drama, and whether or not we could be disadvantaged by it. But let's go to the lines. We've got Terry on, who's got a thought on this. Hello, Terry.
It goes back to a little bit before that. I mean, if you look at the Middle East, I mean, Britain and America decided we wanted regime change. We went away and all this Arab Spring. But the people didn't vote for what they wanted. They wanted change, and they wanted to put their own people in, not America's. It's very, very similar
I see.
To the Brexit vote. I mean, if you look at, let's take America. Why did Hillary Clinton lose, apart from the fact she was bloody useless, really? They wouldn't listen to the people. And the whole of America, of the Republican side, the Democrats and everything, they voted for Trump because the people aren't getting listened to. And they're just trampling them over, and that's how Trump's won. Yeah. Now, very, very similar. The people in Britain were trampled. The British government wouldn't listen to them. That's why, mostly due to Nigel Farage, we went against
I think it surprised everybody, didn't it, when the actual when the vote came in? Yeah.
Now, but why? But the European Union refuses to change. It's bloated with bureaucracy. They haven't had, I think it's for 24 years, a set of accounts audited because of corruption. Yeah. Now, we're having a situation now where the Remainers are are trying to thwart the vote. They're trying to milk it down, stop it, whatever way. And I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing the end of democracy in Britain.
Oh, I think that we're seeing the end of democracy everywhere, to be honest.
Yes. But I remember what George Bush Sr. said before the Iraq War. He said, what you're going to see now is a new world order.
Yeah.
And that sent the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end.
Yeah, and I think we've been seeing it for some time, yeah.
Now then, when you look at the Brexit, you got the this Belgian lad that's been put up to negotiate the Brexit on behalf of the European Union. He stood up in the Parliament and he said, I have one comment for the British people. Welcome to hell. Now, that's so much for fair play. If that's what he said to the people you've got to negotiate, welcome to hell. In other words, you're not going to think it's going to be easy.
Right.
Now, it's like communism. Once you join, you can't leave, right?
That's the Hotel California, that.
Its foreign aid budget to the will of the people. You're giving billions away to girl pop groups in Ethiopia, and yet they're robbing our own. They're robbing our own with the policies.
All right. Well, I think we're getting a wee bit off track there, Terry, but I take your point. Some good points in amongst that somewhere. Gary Lineker upset some of the Brexit voters when he said this on Have I Got News For You recently. Don't think he's far off the truth. Britain's ambassador to the EU, Sir Ivan Rogers, has announced that a Brexit deal could take 10 years. That's not fair. Most of the people who voted it will be dead by then. Right, yeah, okay. That from Matty. Thank you very much for getting in touch.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should the island have a sugar tax? Again, something that we've discussed a number of times. But the owners of a well-known local soft drinks producer say that whilst they agree with the ethos of a sugar tax, they're waiting to see how it's going to be implemented. Will Folds and Charlotte Traynor were speaking after Tynwald's recent decision to mirror the UK's introduction of the tax in 2018. Their Apple Orphanage produces apple juice and other soft drinks along with a cider. Will and Charlotte told Howard Kane it's too early to say for certain if their drinks will be exempt from the tax. What do we think about this? Should the island go down the same path as the UK with the introduction of a sugar tax? Should it be levied on all foods and not just soft drinks? It does seem unfair that Kellogg's and people like that can spray cereals with sugar, whereas drink manufacturers can't without paying a big tax. Do you think that's fair? Carol says, wouldn't it be better if the people themselves would be told that they'll be entitled to medical treatment only when they've lost weight, rather than all the people, especially the old and those on a tight budget, being targeted as well, says Carol. Well, the trouble with that is that it's only people who are slim generally who reckon it's easy to lose weight. I'm not huge, but I've been technically overweight my entire adult life, I think. With me, it's because I tend to look after my body. I don't exercise it terribly much. I don't stress it if I can help it, and I rest it as much as I possibly can. But the result of that is that, whilst I eat sort of fairly normal portions of food, I tend to be a bit overweight, and it is irritating. I mean, you do see some people who are huge, and you just think, come on, you can help yourself there. But it's not as easy as people tend to make out, and it's thin people that tend to make out that it's easy to lose weight. Oh, well, just say no. Just don't eat so much. Exercise more or whatever. Not always that simple. But you might agree with what Carol thinks about that. And somebody sent a text, says, yet another government con to raise money. If sugar's so dangerous, why don't the government control it with legislation? Well, they are doing. They're taxing it. That's a way of controlling it, isn't it? And raising a few quid as well. Maybe you can tell us, Stu, Tynwald voted yes on sugar tax last week. At 5 o'clock the same day, Isle of Man Breweries put the price of all drinks up by 5 pence. Happy Christmas from the brewery. No wonder the pubs are empty and everybody's buying the drinks from the supermarkets. Well, I don't know what the correlation is between sugar tax and booze, because I thought that the process of fermentation, making beer, it actually turns sugar into alcohol. So the end product that you're selling doesn't have so much sugar in it because it's been turned to alcohol. But what do I know? Stu, the thought of you exercising cracks me up. Well, I don't. I've explained before, you could take 2 engines, Formula 1 engine, lasts for 2 hours, and then it's just scrap metal. Very powerful, very efficient, and all the rest of it. An old steam engine, the Fred Dibner job, 200 years old, might be a bit smoky and dirty and oily and stuff, but it's still going after 200 years. And I like to think of my body as an old steam engine. Stu, I'm really pleased it's just a tax for soft drinks. drinks for obvious reasons. I always say everything in moderation's fine. This is from Nick, the sweet shop man. However, if I had to increase prices to allow for additional taxes, our business wouldn't be able to sustain that. Oh, well, good news then, Nick. Yeah, smashing. This just come in, apropos of the sugar tax. Telegraph paper in the UK, coffee shops there are going to charge £0.01 per sugar sachet from January, apparently. Get on the bandwagon, Stuart, says our contributor. Well, we don't do so. I hate sachets, don't you? I hate sugar sachets at these chain coffee shops because I always get the wrong one, and I hate sachets of salt and pepper and sauces and things. I hate them. I just think they're horrible waste of packaging and stuff. So at my shop, we've got the proper sugar shakers. But yes, I mean, if there's going to be an implication, then it's the customer that's going to end up paying for it, I suppose, at the end of the day. So yes, a penny a sachet. I don't know how much those sachets of sugar cost. I bet they're a lot more expensive than £1 for 100. So maybe it's just taking the sting out of the tax part of it. Hi, Stu, less fat for us, more fat for government. Well, that's the trouble, Phil, with all these things, isn't it? And I'm getting increasingly concerned about the amount of tax that we're all paying. I'd love there to be a number, and governments are too scared to do it, but I think here's a challenge to the Treasury. Let's have a figure and let's refresh it every year about how much the average taxpayer in the Isle of Man pays out of their salary in tax. I bet it's probably 40 or 50% now. If you take all the different taxes, income tax, national insurance, VAT, duties, fuel levies and things like that, I think it's probably 40 to 50% of all the money that we earn goes to the government in tax, and we're not getting that much back because the government's constantly telling us that it's skint and coming up with new ways to scalp us. Yes, I'm increasingly concerned by that, but as Phil says, I'm afraid that as far as I'm concerned, this won't make any difference to anything other than raising more funds for the government. It'll just hit those of us who use soft drinks sensibly. Those who drink too many sugary soft drinks will simply find the money from somewhere else and continue regardless. I'm of the opinion that dissuasion doesn't work, only persuasion by education. By attempting to dissuade people from drinking sugary drink will only result in resentment. How many people have given up smoking simply because of the cost spiralling? Probably not anywhere near as many as those who've done it for health and education reasons. Good, thank you, Phil. Some good thoughts there. Interesting. I mean, I've said before that I finally gave up smoking because of the cost, but that was because I had a month where I was particularly skint. I'm always usually fairly skint, but I had a month where I had to pay probably the car insurance and I had some repairs to pay for. So 3 weeks into the month, I found that I'd got no money and I ended up buying a carton of cigarettes on a credit card, and that was the tipping point for me where it's like, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm confused how a tax on drinks will work. If it's at the point of sale, okay, but if it's on manufacturers, does this mean that the Manx government will have to claim on sales from the UK? That was a question that I had as well last time we talked about this. Who will benefit from the tax? Will the Manx government get an amount? How will a penny added to the price of coffee make people reduce sugar intake? Make it 50p a sachet, and it might. But why would you want to do that? You know, what's all this vilification of sugar? Yes, all right, we've got an increasingly obese population, I suppose, but it's not just sugar, that. It's lifestyle choices and food and awful lot of things other than sugar. It just seems to be an easy target because it seems to be easily taxable. Sugar tax should be abolished. 99% of soft drinks and cordials are already reduced sugar as they contain aspartame. Only a select few do not. I avoid aspartame-laden products. This is the artificial sweetener. On purpose, it seems that if this ruling goes through, then the profits should go to cancer charities instead of the NHS for obesity treatments, as I'm sure we'll see a peak in cancer rates if people are pushed to drink that poison. Fact, says Jason. Right.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme, not only this week, but all through the year. We'll be back in January with more, and if you'd like to get involved in the discussion then, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag #MRTalkingHeads. If you'd like to listen back to any of this week's programmes in full, you can do that by visiting the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme in the new year, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.